This timeless quote by Eleanor Roosevelt carries immense wisdom, powerfully capturing the essence of self-worth, personal empowerment, and emotional resilience. The idea that our sense of inferiority or inadequacy is fundamentally a choice rather than an inevitable outcome challenges many conventional assumptions about self-esteem, social interaction, and personal identity. At its core, Roosevelt's insight suggests that our emotional responses to external circumstances, criticisms, and judgments are not passively inflicted upon us, but rather actively permitted by us. This shifts responsibility for our emotional well-being firmly onto our own shoulders, empowering us with the realization that we have far greater control over our emotional landscape than we typically acknowledge. Consider the concept of inferiority itself. Feelings of inferiority arise primarily from comparisons. Comparing ourselves with others, societal standards, or our personal ideals. When we view ourselves negatively relative to these benchmarks, we risk internalizing inadequacy. But crucially, Roosevelt emphasizes that this internalization requires our consent. It is not automatic, nor is it unavoidable. This notion becomes profoundly liberating when fully understood. By recognizing our capacity to accept or reject the narratives others impose upon us, we reclaim authority over our self-perception. The insults or criticisms of others, no matter how harsh, lose their power when we refuse to internalize them. Indeed, feelings of inferiority thrive only when nurtured by our acceptance. Deny them this nourishment, and they wither. Yet practical application of this wisdom is challenging. Society frequently bombards us with images and messages designed to highlight inadequacies, whether through social media, advertisements, or interpersonal interactions. We are continually encouraged, explicitly or implicitly, to measure ourselves against unrealistic standards of beauty, success, wealth, or happiness. This comparison culture can subtly, yet powerfully, induce feelings of inferiority if we unwittingly consent to the idea that our worth is contingent upon meeting these external criteria. The first step toward resisting this dynamic involves cultivating self-awareness. Awareness allows us to recognize when external criticisms begin to shape our internal dialogue negatively. By identifying the precise moments when we begin to consent to feelings of inferiority, we can consciously choose differently. Awareness disrupts the automatic acceptance of inadequacy, enabling us to reassert our intrinsic value independent of external judgments. Equally important is the deliberate practice of self-compassion. This entails treating ourselves with the same kindness, patience, and understanding we would extend to a dear friend facing similar criticisms. Self-compassion fosters resilience, bolstering our emotional defenses against external negativity and reducing our susceptibility to internalizing harmful judgments. Moreover, developing a stable foundation of self-esteem grounded in internal rather than external validation further fortifies us against feelings of inferiority. When our sense of self-worth derives primarily from external approval, be it through achievements, social validation, or praise, we remain perpetually vulnerable to external fluctuations. Conversely, anchoring self-worth in intrinsic qualities like integrity, kindness, resilience, and authenticity creates an unshakable foundation immune to external critiques. Roosevelt's quote also implicitly highlights the role of perception. Our emotional responses are heavily influenced by how we interpret the actions and opinions of others. If we perceive criticism as an attack on our identity or worth, we become susceptible to feelings of inferiority. However, reframing criticism as opportunities for growth, learning, or merely reflections of the critic's biases can dramatically alter our emotional responses. In doing so, we deny our consent to inferiority by proactively choosing empowering interpretations of potentially negative experiences. Furthermore, recognizing that everyone experiences vulnerability and self-doubt can profoundly alter how we perceive feelings of inadequacy. Understanding that inferiority is a universal human experience, not a personal failing, normalizes our struggles and diminishes their power. This empathetic perspective allows us to acknowledge moments of vulnerability without granting them authority over our overall self-worth. Another critical aspect is the importance of boundaries. Establishing clear emotional and psychological boundaries can effectively safeguard our inner world against external negativity. Boundaries delineate what we allow into our emotional and mental space, effectively functioning as gates that filter external influences. When boundaries are clear and firm, we instinctively withhold consent to feelings of inferiority, recognizing them as invasions rather than truths. Moreover, empowerment through choice is central to Roosevelt's insight. Realizing that consent to feeling inferior is ultimately a choice grants us profound empowerment. We are no longer passive victims subjected to external judgments. Instead, we are active agents consciously determining our emotional experiences. This shift from victimhood to empowerment transforms our relationship with inferiority from one of vulnerability to one of strength. However, this empowerment does not imply immunity from hurt or criticism. Instead, it provides us with a framework for navigating these experiences without internalizing negativity. Roosevelt's wisdom acknowledges that external negativity will always exist, but emphasizes our freedom in choosing how deeply it impacts us. Practicing mindfulness further supports this empowered stance. Mindfulness involves non-judgmental awareness of our present emotional and mental states, allowing us to observe feelings of inferiority without becoming entangled in them. Through mindfulness, we learn to observe emotions objectively, recognizing their transient nature. This awareness significantly reduces the likelihood of granting consent to inferiority, as we understand these feelings to be temporary visitors rather than permanent residents. Moreover, developing resilience through intentional practice enhances our ability to withstand external negativity. Resilience involves the capacity to recover quickly from setbacks, adapt to challenges, and maintain emotional equilibrium amidst turmoil. Resilient individuals inherently grant less consent to feelings of inferiority because their emotional foundations remain stable despite external disturbances. Education also plays a crucial role. Understanding psychological dynamics, such as projection, where individuals transfer their insecurities onto others, helps us contextualize external negativity accurately. Often, criticisms directed toward us reflect the critic's own unresolved insecurities rather than objective assessments of our worth. Recognizing this psychological phenomenon allows us to depersonalize negativity, further diminishing its emotional impact. Furthermore, surrounding ourselves with supportive, positive influences greatly aids our capacity to withhold consent from inferiority. Positive relationships provide emotional reinforcement, counteracting negative external influences and reminding us consistently of our inherent worth. A strong support network acts as a buffer, reducing our vulnerability to external criticisms and strengthening our internal validation. Lastly, cultivating gratitude reinforces a robust internal emotional landscape. Gratitude shifts our focus from perceived inadequacies to recognizing and appreciating our strengths, resources, and positive experiences. This shift fundamentally alters our internal dialogue, creating a default stance of appreciation rather than inadequacy. As gratitude becomes habitual, feelings of inferiority naturally diminish, as they find less fertile ground in our emotional ecosystem. In summary, Eleanor Roosevelt's profound observation underscores our immense emotional autonomy. The realization that inferiority requires our consent liberates us from passive victimhood, empowering us to actively define our emotional experiences. Through self-awareness, self-compassion, internal validation, perception shifts, boundary setting, mindfulness, resilience, education, supportive relationships, and gratitude, we reclaim authority over our emotional world, firmly withholding our consent to feelings of inferiority. Thus, the power to shape our self-worth remains fundamentally ours, a liberating truth that can radically transform our lives.